move on a little bit and go on to our next topic. And the next topic is going to be what we call polymers. This is starting to lead into the chemistry of life. Okay, what are polymers? Polymers are large organic molecules. They're made of a whole bunch of smaller organic subunit molecules. They're covalently bonded together to make some kind of product. Okay, now we're very familiar with polymers. All kinds of different stuff in our technology depends on polymers. That stuff in your backpacks, those bottles that you have your drinks in, plastics, all artificial fibers, those are all various kinds of polymers made from small organic molecules. Okay, now, let's use an example, what we call polyethylene. It's a common kind of plastic. If anybody has one of those plastic kind of translucent white cutting boards, that's made of polyethylene. A lot of drink containers are also made of polyethylene. But let's see what this thing is. Polyethylene, poly means many, ethylene, that's a subunit. So here is ethylene. It's a small two-carbon hydrocarbon gas with a double bond between the two carbons. Since it's a hydrocarbon made nothing else than carbon and hydrogen, obviously it's a very hydrophobic or nonpolar molecule, just like all hydrocarbons are. Okay, now let's make polyethylene. What we're going to do is join hundreds or even thousands of these ethylene molecules together to make a polymer. So we'll start here. So here's part of a polyethylene molecule. Okay, now ethylene is a gas at room temperature, but polyethylene is obviously a solid at room temperature. Since the ethylene subunits are very hydrophobic, polyethylene is as well. You can tell that by taking one of those plastic cutting boards and dropping some water on. You notice the water beads up. It does not spread on the board. It beads up as a little droplet. And the reason why is the water molecules are trying to avoid the hydrophobic surface of polyethylene as much as possible. Gravity forces them down, but they're trying to avoid it, so you keep the minimal contact area that you possibly can. So that's why water beads up on these types of hydrophobic solids, because it does not want to be in contact with the polyethylene, but gravity has another idea. Okay, so that's polyethylene. And if you take ethylene and combine it with oxygen, it's a very ignited, in other words, overcome the activation energy barrier, it burns quite effectively. Likewise, you could set a polyethylene cutting board on fire and it will burn quite nicely too. And it will be a very exergonic reaction. Also puts out toxic fumes, so don't try that. Okay, so that's an example of a commercially made polymer. And things like polystyrene, what they used to make, plastic model kits and stuff out, or styrofoam out. Here again, styrene is a very hydrophobic molecule that's a liquid at room temperature. Join it together, you can make polystyrene. And there's a whole bunch of other, polypropylene and what have you. Okay, well, it turns out the molecules of life, the proteins, the lipids, the nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, the carbohydrates, or what are more technically called polysaccharides, those molecules are polymers as well. For instance, DNA and RNA, the nucleic acids, are made of what we call subunits called nucleotides, and they themselves are polymers of three different things. Proteins are polymers of a wide range of small organic molecules called amino acids. Polysaccharides are made of different sugar molecules covalently joined together. So the large molecules that are to do most of the work in our cells and in our bodies are polymers of smaller organic molecules. Now, when we make these commercial polymers, there's all kinds of different chemical reactions that you use to make these different kinds of polymers. But biological polymers, as well as some industrial polymers, are made by one class of reactions and broken down by a different class. And that's true with some of our industrial polymers too. So and these kinds of reactions, let's see how this goes. What we're going to start out with is a molecule. Let's just call this molecule A, whatever it is. Now, many of our common molecules found in living organisms are going to have, coming off of carbons, hydrogens and OH or hydroxyl groups. That's real common. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have A, and I'm going to stick an OH group here coming off of a carbon, and over here I'm going to have another, a hydrogen coming off. Now let's take the molecule called B. And likewise, it too is likely to have OH groups and hydrogen. So here we have two molecules. And what we're going to try to do is use those to start forming a polymer. In other words, covalently attach those two molecules together. These things could be nucleotides, they could be amino acids, they could be sugars, whatever. So we're going to start forming some kind of biological polymer. Well, there's a particular type of reaction that does that. What we're going to do is we're going to take this OH group. Let's stick the hydrogen here. And this hydrogen here, the two things I've circled, we're going to take that. We're going to remove both and make a covalent bond directly from A to B. So let's do that. Now we have a covalent bond between the two. Now what's happened, we've removed this OH and this hydrogen, and we joined them together to form a water molecule, which is now released. Now there's two names for this type of reaction. They're interchangeable. I tend to prefer one, but they're interchangeable. Now, one name for this reaction is, okay, we're removing a water molecule. What do we call a process that we take something and remove water from it? Like, let's suppose you go out on a hot summer day in Arizona and you run out of water. The water vapor will slowly evaporate from you, and then you'll finally reach a critical point where you've lost so much water you collapse and die. That happens to people trying to cross the border all the time. What do they die of? What's that process called where you're losing so much? Dehydration. That's one name for this type of reaction. A dehydration reaction. Because you're removing water. Now there's another term for that. I go out and buy a can of milk. What they've done is they've concentrated the milk by taking it and heating it up and boiling off or driving off most of the water. So now you got a can of concentrated milk, and that's called Borden's condensed milk, or Campbell's condensed soup. A quart of soup in a can this big. Okay, so that's another name for this. Condensation, that's the one I personally prefer, but either is interchangeable. So we call these kinds of reactions where chemically removing a water, discarding it, and forming a covalent bond between the subunits, we call those condensation reactions or dehydration reactions. Either is accepted. Okay, now there is a nasty problem with condensation reactions. And the problem is this: they're all endergonic. They take energy. You need to use energy to get that kind of reaction to occur. So that is not good, because what that means is every time you make a new DNA molecule, every time you assemble a protein together, every time you make starch or glycogen or cellulose or what have you, you've got to use energy because making those require a whole bunch of condensation reactions. So you've got to have a supply of energy in order for those reactions to occur. Otherwise they won't. They will stop dead in their tracks. So since we're constantly making large biological polymers, that's one reason we constantly need a supply of available metabolic energy. Now, we can do the reverse reaction. Let's take we take this. Now we're going to add a water molecule in here. We're going to take a water molecule. What we're going to do is force the water molecule. Part of it goes here, part of it goes here, and we will break the covalent bond between A and B. So, what we have, and I'm going to underline that, comes from the water molecule, and this hydrogen comes from the water molecule. And we've broken the covalent bond between A and B. Now we call that reaction a hydrolysis reaction. Hydro means water and lysis means to split something. So you're literally splitting this polymer in two by forcing a water molecule between that covalent bond. So this is a hydrolysis reaction. And if a condensation reaction uses energy, it's endergonic. What do you think about a hydrolysis reaction? What would you expect for a hydrolysis reaction? Excuse me? Exergonic, yeah, absolutely. Hydrolysis reactions release energy. They may not release all that much, but all you have to do is start them off. Now, many hydrolysis reactions in living cells, when you're breaking down proteins or whatever the case is, they're all exergonic, but most of them have high enough activation energies that you require a catalyst, an enzyme, to catalyze that reaction. Otherwise, it would not occur at room temperature. For instance, if I take a protein, okay, protein is a polymer made of amino acids, and the amino acids are joined together by condensation reactions. Now, I could take a protein, and if I heat it up enough, and by enough, we're talking oven temperatures and things like that, that will spontaneously cause those covalent bonds between amino acids to break. In other words, the heat will allow the hydrolysis reaction to occur. Well, we don't want to heat, if we want to break up a protein in our cells, we certainly don't want to heat our bodies up to oven temperatures. That would be very, very bad. So instead, we use enzymes that will catalyze the hydrolysis reactions and tear amino acids off of proteins. And they can do that at body temperature. But ordinarily, those bonds joining the amino acids together to make a protein, ordinarily they will not hydrolyze very much at room temperature spontaneously. That's true of virtually all of our biological molecules. At room temperature, they're fairly stable. To break them down, we need catalysts to catalyze the hydrolysis reactions. They will occur spontaneously if you heat things up enough, but you have to heat them up a lot hotter than you'd like to be. Okay, so that's a couple kinds of reactions here. All right. Now one last topic and then we'll have a break.